Thank you. Good evening, welcome everyone. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. I'm Councillor James Stanley, Chair of this committee. We'll just do the usual preamble and then we'll get down to business. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay. Right, down to the agenda. Item 1, appointment of substitutes. Julian? Thanks. Declarations of interest. Right, we'll just go around the room. Councillor Cochrane.
I am an allotment holder.
Thank you. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. In the interests of transparency, a connected family member is an ex-employee of Worcester City Council, so I'm declaring possible interests in agenda items 12, 14 and 21.
Many thanks. Councillor Jagger.
I want to declare an interest on the Scala item, and I'm opening the agenda and I can't see what number it is, but I was involved in the initial stages of an alternative plan, and I'm not involved anymore with that, and I have no financial interest with it.
Councillor Lewing, then Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. For the Scala project, as I'm Chair of Planning, I will leave the room, if that's okay, to make sure that there's no conflict of interest.
I believe following correspondence received today is your choice rather than something you have to do.
Yeah, I just think it's easier for everyone that it means that I haven't been compromised.
Fair enough,
Thank you.
no problem. And Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. 3 really. The Scala, that's item 12. Because I'm a member of the Planning Committee, I shall leave the room for that one. Joint Museums Committee is item 9. I'm a member of that. The Sons of Rest, I should say that the Worcester Rotary Club, which I'm a member, is actually actively involved with the Sons of Rest. I'm not, and I'm not a member of the group that is within the Rotary Club, but I think you should know. Thank you.
Many thanks. Councillor Ali.
Sorry, Chair, I just realised this item discuss about regulatory services, and I hold a taxi licence in the city.
Absolutely fine, no problem at all. Anyone else wishing to declare any interest? Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not declaring an interest, but I just thought I'd round up for that very helpful roundtable declaration process. Obviously, members are aware that some interests, it's beneficial to disclose instead of being required, and only a certain subset of members' interests require members to actually withdraw and leave the room. And on the basis of everything I know from the interest that declared in the agenda items, there are no items there that I would advise members have a prejudicial or problematic interest that would require their withdrawal. Having said that, it's really a matter for members of Planning Committee how they choose to participate in the Scala item. They are not prevented from doing both.
Many thanks. Okay, I think that's everyone rounded up, so to speak. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 3, public representations. Julian, do you want to speak without a microphone, or shall I just? If you're happy to introduce. Okay, right, no problem. Okay, we have two speakers from the floor this evening. The first one is Francis Lancaster. Francis, if you'd like to come to the table, please. Do take a seat, and as you're aware, you've been here many times, 5 minutes, you can utilise that time as you wish, and you'll just get a little indication from this end when you're moving towards the end of that period, okay? So,
Good evening, councillors. Some of you may be aware that I have a qualification, that I have a PhD in archaeology. I'm also a historian, and I continue, even though I'm a retired teacher, I continue to do practical archaeological fieldwork. So I'm here tonight to ask you something. It's the rare occasion when I actually use my title, but I kind of, forgive me for the introduction, to hang it on. I joked with Councillor Gregson earlier that we were among the doctors who have qualifications which we can't actually cure a blister. But I hope that I'm addressing something which is practical, is advantage to this city, and which I hope this committee and this council will take on. I do have a question, not regarding the Scala project's capital refurbishment, which I know that you will ask some tough questions to officers later on this agenda. But it would be a great embarrassment and shame if, when it's finished, as I'm confident it will be finished, there would be pressure on the budget to operate it, that either that would not be practical or it would take away funding from other vital council services. So it may seem odd that now I'm going to ask you for something that costs money, and that's a physical, proper history and heritage trail for this city. Councillors will be aware that this has been mooted over many years. A succession of mayors of this city have supported the idea, but it's never come to fruition. I congratulate the city on having the ambition regarding the connecting the riverside, Shrub Hill and Lowesmore, the Scala project, but there's something missing. We have so many wonderful attractions, so much history and heritage in this city, and I'm not just talking about the cathedral or Friar Street or the Porcelain Museum. I was in the Corn Market on the other day, and I suddenly thought, yeah, the Corn Market tells us what it was. I know nothing about its history, except that Old St. Martin's in the Corn Market, the father of the late councillor Stuart Denley Maxwell was the rector there for many years, to be followed by my father. And each of us will have some portion of this city, you know, in our blood almost. I've lived in this city on and off since 1966. I've always come back to it, even though I've been round and round the world. But it strikes me more than ever seeing the changes and the valuable changes that this council wants to make, that is lacking. We have many wonderful buildings. I mean, just walking, how many thousands of times have we walked past the Hot Market? Well, that's a wonderful example of Victorian architecture that I'm pretty sure, if I take no notice of it, then sorry, but I'm sure many needs to be shown off. Worcester, of course, failed to get the National Civil War Centre, despite Worcester's central part in the Civil War. It went to Newark. The city got nearly £1 million in order to repair the commandery and to save the dining room from the prospect of seriously being damaged. That would have been a tragedy and a terrible shame on this city if that had happened. So, you know, no complaint about that. And anyone who's been to Newark, they did a great job. But Newark is in the middle of nowhere. When I visited it, I was probably the only person in the room, and the museum itself is smaller than the assembly room, where the display is. So I think still there's a wonderful opportunity for us in Worcester to anchor a tourism offer and an education and history and heritage offer, not just on the Civil War, though we should take advantage of that. After all, we've been given that, but we've been given so many other things. And I think it has to be a physical trail. There has to be information that people can actually see in front of them, not just on an app. Because it doesn't engage people's attention otherwise. Now, if you look around in City Walls Road and Crowngate, there are actually some information boards from previous Section 106 agreements and the efforts of James Dinn and others. James Dinn, of course, has a book, which you can go into Waterstones and buy, Worcester in 50 Buildings. I bought Bob Blackenford's, actually, I think Bob Blamford's, 1001 Worcester Secrets, Terry Wardle's Historic Worcester Streets, in which every single historic street is given the background. And I think that with that resource, with the resource of Worcester people, and with councillors' local interest and engagement, it's time to produce a history and heritage train for this city. And thanks very much, Mr. Chairman and councillors.
Thank you, Francis. I'm sure that the officers will be emailing you a response in due course. The second public participant is Karen O'Callaghan. You come to the table, please. You're very welcome. When you're ready, you have 5 minutes. I will just indicate when you're moving towards the 5-minute period. Okay? So when you're ready.
Good evening, everybody. I've been a tenant of Green Lane allotments for 3 years in March. I'm not a site rep, and I've come to represent the views of some of the marginalised community we have. We've got a site with 31 plots at Green Lane. A number of the tenants have been plot holders for many years. They're aged between 70 and 80, and they used to qualify for the 50% discount that people used to get from 2008. This means they've worked those plots for at least 16 years, many of them 20. Allotment life to them is much more than anybody can imagine. They're as regular as clockwork attending. One told me, I come up at 4:30 in the summer and listen to the birds. One tenant at the top, Mick, in his 70s, owns a full plot, and his wife, Linda, a plot opposite. His brother had a full plot nearby as well, but he died recently. There's another plot holder. He's always there. His wife died, so if he's not attending the plot, he's the other side visiting her grave. There's another elderly couple who work 2 half plots each. These people are the absolute hub of our site. Over the years, they watch people take on plots and come and go. The reason they've got more than one plot, they've told me, we took them on when nobody else wanted to. They really care about their plots, and allotment life really keeps them going. So changes to our tenants causes a ripple of worry. Imagine how they felt when they heard reports of price hikes in Worcester News and that their 50% concession will go. It took a month from the council meeting on the 16th of October until the 17th of November for us as plot holders to receive confirmation of the price increases. This older group is subject to the same price rises that we all cope with, and now they're having to cope with this on top. Seeds, compost, etc. getting more expensive for them too. They'll of course pay it and make sacrifices elsewhere. But is that fair? I don't believe the council's looked at the cost implications for the variables such as these, and one example I looked at means the new prices will mean an increase of 97%. I put a post on Nextdoor and I asked for advice, who should I speak to about this situation? The response was sometimes comical, but it was huge. It generated 258 comments, and when I checked, the traffic was 6,600 views. 2 comments made me sad. One person spoke of a friend who'd already given up because of the impending price rises. One lady who'd hoped to make it tonight is a student with a young child, and her mortgage has increased to £900 a month, so she's worried she'll have to give up too. Some of us qualified for concessions, but because charges were reasonable, then we didn't apply for them. My plot holders, like me, are used to working with really limited resources and budgeting. The serious plot holders are a really resourceful bunch. So what tenants would like to know is why the expenditure is so high, £115,000. £115,000. Has this been looked at? Can we have access to the figures? Is there a breakdown for each site? Our site gets minimal work. We've had changes of locks and water leaks repaired. That's it in 3 years. In my opinion, there's wasted opportunity for income. At the moment, there are 60 vacancies showing on the council's website, with plenty of people on the waiting list. Why? We had 2 to 4 plots on our site left empty for 2 years. Why aren't these turned around efficiently, which would be better for the land as well? Some are abandoned mid-season. Why aren't they turned around? That's a potential double income. Before this meeting, I read the Council and Allotment Association's report of 2021. I think that costs the council a lot of money to get that report, and it makes grim reading. I've been a plot holder since we've had the new allotment officer, so I've been there since the changes, and I can't see that anything's improved. Back then, water usage was identified as a problem, yet nothing's been done to implement any recommendations. Why aren't we worked with? Given information about saving water, given discounted water butts, asked for suggestions in saving money, maybe some incentives. The water charge alone has been so badly considered. Many of our tenants would have preferred for it to be included in the rent, as it always has been. Even site reps don't know if we're paying next year or not, and if we are, how on earth this will be monitored, and that may incur further expenses. Water was always part of the rent, and so included in. So if we include that with the increase of the water charge, our percentage increase for a full plot is really 67%. How can we engage and support when we're given no information and no means to communicate our ideas? In summation, we're worried. We think it's unfair, and we'd really like some help. And I'd like to leave that with everybody to think about, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you will receive a response in due course. To move to agenda item 4, first of all, the minutes of the last meeting of this committee. Just go through them by page and then pause at the end. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. Any questions or comment relating to the minutes of the last meeting? Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. Could the monitoring officer please just give me an update on the position with regards to the Tudor house? And I understand external legal advice was being taken. Could you just give the committee an update, please? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. External legal advice has been commissioned. The advice note has, in relation to the implications of the longer lease, has not been received yet. When it has been received, I will circulate it through group leaders as promised.
Or comment relating directly to those minutes? No. So happy to sign them, which I will do at the conclusion of tonight's business. Agenda item 5 is the minutes for income management last time. I'm sure that with the chair being part of this meeting and myself and Councillor, I was wondering if there's anyone else in the room, but we will, I'm sure, sign them as being correct in due course. So to the agenda items that we have before us, can I just say before we kick off, we've got a lot to get through tonight, and it would help if we kept contributions to, I don't want to stifle debate, we're not doing that, but equally if we could just be careful about time management. So plead or beseech you to do that, I'd be very grateful. Thanks very much. So to move to agenda item 6, quarter 3 performance report, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. This is our regular report for quarter 3, and in the light of the Chair's comments, I'll keep my remarks very brief. There are a number of red indicators. The two in respect of voluntary leavers rate and traineeships are marginally below where we'd like them to be, and in fact the longer term trend remains positive with those. In respect of satisfaction with services, there is a more detailed report elsewhere on the agenda, so I'll comment on that when we get there. And in respect of complaints, obviously they're red because we'd like to be no complaints moved to the final stage, but there are always one or two, and they are very small numbers. There are detailed comments on each of the indicators, but if there's any points of clarification, happy to leave it there, Chair.
Questions or comment, please? I said brief, but, you know. Lynn Denham.
I mean, just to acknowledge, well done to staff for the hard work involved. I appreciate we don't want to take up lots of time, but I think we shouldn't let it pass without acknowledging, the work and effort behind these. And in terms of customer service, our staff are doing really well. There's nothing for concern in here, and quite a lot to celebrate.
Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question on the project for the Property Services Freedom Leisure, because it says that we would hear about the award by the end of January, and I was just wondering whether we have heard anything, please.
I'm happy to, Chair. Yep. We have received information, but it's embargoed for public release for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, just a very quick one actually on page 34 about, so beg your pardon, page, got the right page, beg your pardon. Yeah. Yes, it's about the actual apprentices rate. We seem to be slightly behind target there. Are we going to do anything to obviously improve that and take on more trainee apprentices?
Through you, Chair. Something that the officer leadership team were discussing this morning, actually. The apprenticeship target is a challenge for us in the number that's set, but it isn't out of reach. But the implications for the council at a time when our budget is very constrained is that apprenticeships aren't free. There is still a base budget cost to the council, so they are the same as any other staffing cost. It is a more modest budget pressure, but it's undoubtedly a budget pressure. And so we have to apply the same degree of rigour that we do to every vacancy that comes through our internal scrutiny process and really challenge ourselves about whether it's essential. That's not to say that we don't value the role of apprenticeships at all. We really do. And we've got some very successful case studies and where we've been able to keep people on in permanent roles. But I think it's a necessary consequence of where we are at the moment, budget-wise, that target is a challenge.
Thank you very much. Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 26 to 27, the Trinity Street section, and it says there that there are a number of appointments with homeless people who are unable to speak English. What does the council do in that case to facilitate?
Through you, Chair. We have a contract on a sort of retainer basis with a translation agency, and they are able to offer translation services against all of our key languages spoken as identified in our census. When somebody comes forward with a language that isn't covered by that agency arrangement, then we do source something bespoke. But in every occasion, we have to make an assessment about what's required to break down the language barrier. And in some instances, these days, individuals prefer to use online tools to do some translation themselves and then decide how much they want to have that bespoke commissioned translation service. But whenever a customer, whenever we assess it's necessary or a customer wants it, then we will commission it. It can obviously lead to a delay in being able to provide services because there's only a couple of languages that we can provide a translation for, very rapidly. Others need to be brought in even over the telephone or whatever. But that arrangement's been in place for a number of years. It works well. We have reviewed and renewed the contract, and we don't get any adverse feedback on it. You'll remember from seeing the census data at the P&R report, there's quite a lot of granularity in Worcester of the languages spoken. So there's some key languages, and then there's lots of others. So, you know, necessarily there will sometimes be a lag in sourcing the right translation service.
Thank you, that was very clear, and obviously I was concerned that the customers understood what was being said and the process. So as long as that is happening, I'm reasonably happy with it.
Many thanks. Councillor Jagger.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question regarding some of the surveys that we're doing. Can I clarify the type of survey that we're conducting? Are we using online surveys on the council website, using this sort of job form that we've used for other platforms, or are these surveys sent by post? How are they? How is the data collected?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the main survey that we do every year, that is an online survey, so we primarily do that online, but we make copies available at our community centres and at the Guildhall and various other locations that we think is important, and we provide translated copies as well, so there are alternatives there. So we try to find a range of different ways of engaging with the public as much as we can, but I don't think we're wedded to any one particular survey. We try to actually develop the right approach to that, depending on the content of what it is we're trying to gather and the information we're trying to get.
Okay, many thanks. Any further questions, comment? No, in that case, the only question to ask is that we're content to note. Okay? Thank you. To agenda item 7, Q3 financial monitoring report. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the latest year-end forecast as at the end of December for the revenue budget. The report contains a lot of detail, but if I refer you to Appendix 1, that's a fairly concise summary that we can talk through. So if you've all got Appendix 1, you'll see that the third column, headed up Q3, shows that at the bottom, a year-end forecast surplus of 442k. And that's an improvement over the previous quarter of 380. Obviously, that's good news, but I'll just remind you that this time last year, we set a budget for the current year that required drawing from reserves of 1.7 million. So whilst we technically refer to this as a surplus, it will in fact be a lesser reduction from reserves. Nevertheless, still good news. The final column, where we compare Q3 and Q2, just shows what the main movements in that are and how the improvement has come about. You'll see in the middle, 109,000 is an improvement in the interest receivable. Combination of interest rates remaining high and our cash flow balances being positive, boosted by the grants received from Future High Streets and Towns Fund before we actually incur the expenditure. And lower down, interesting to note on the car parking income and PCNs line, slight tailing off of the income there. Interesting looking at the figures this morning for last month, January, income has remained quite strong. So that's, hopefully that downturn we saw at the end of last year might have only been a temporary blip. And the line underneath that refers to play areas. The services forecast expectation there is that the expenditure will be under budget this year by approximately 50k. Because they're behind in the work that needs doing. However, that work is still required, and so the year-end outturn reports will propose that we carry that forward as a reserve into next year for when the work's actually carried out. Just a couple at the top to then finish with court fees income. 58,000, an improvement in income there. If you'll recall, the Revenue and Benefits Service transferred to its new software. Court actions were suspended for quite a while, and of course during the COVID period as well. That has now restarted, and we're working through the backlog of cases there, so the income there has improved. And then underneath that, just a slight downturn in the bereavement services income. So far this year, the income's been 89% of budget. We've therefore reduced the Q4 forecast down to 90%. I think I'm happy there to halt there, Chair, as an overview, a summary. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Mark. Questions or comment, please? Adrian.
It's always really dangerous when I enter the field of figures and money, so I'll be cautious. But it looks to me as though both markers on the Revs and Bens service imply how successful the transfer back in-house has been in terms of what the overall spend is, what the overall reduction is, and what we're getting in through the court cases. So I'm pleased to see that we made the right decision in doing that.
Any further questions or comment? Marjorie.
Just as I'm very pleased to, thank you, Chair, just as I'm really pleased to see that the income from EV charges is larger than expected.
Further hands to indicate Pat, and then Lynn.
Thank you. I was looking at the cost of temporary accommodation, and in the past we have tried to reduce the cost of that by buying and renovating and providing it ourselves. Is there any more benefit in doing that again?
So again, that was a source of conversation at the leadership team this morning. As members will know, we have increased our stock of temporary accommodation, and that has helped in dealing with what we call the subsidy loss. But I think we are still acutely aware the subsidy loss is still large, probably still moving in the wrong direction, and we need to revisit what our plan is to try and tackle that. We've asked for a paper on that specific item to come to us in the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure that will be an agenda item for a future Communities Committee to discuss and debate.
Lyndon.
Thank you. Yes, also welcome the increased income from EV charging, which absolutely shows how needed it is, and we're kind of still expanding our installation. Not all the planned ones are in, so that's really good to see. A question about, because I hadn't sort of spotted this before, is the cost of IT licenses to Microsoft. That is a huge amount of money kind of going from and it's well above inflation increase, and presumably we've got very little negotiating power. It's public sector money kind of disappearing off to a mega corporate.
Through you, Chair, yeah, we can but agree. The things we can do is alter the profile of our licences, so we can choose to have certain facilities switched on or switched off. We can also reduce the number, so we have to work hard to make sure that those who've got licences are using them and need them. So there are some things that we can do. But the biggest driver of cost in this area at the moment, of course, is cybersecurity. So that's really what's driving it.
Just to pick up on that, if I may, it's a piece of work that's way beyond the scope of tonight, but is there a piece of work in that to determine the reprofiling and what benefits or not may result from that?
Yes, Chair, we do. I mean, it's a regular ongoing process. Right. So we review constantly what our level of need is, and that becomes part of the annual budget cycle to determine whether or not we want to pursue a different route. But I think the licenses are largely what kind of 3-year cycle. So at the end of that cycle, then we have a more thorough review of what we want to do.
Any further questions or comments? All right, so we're being asked to, well, we've succeeded in reviewing, and 1.2 is that we're content to approve the write-offs of council tax and business rates for the quarter. Can I just have a quick show of hands on that, please? Those in favour? I think that's everyone. Yeah. Okay. To agenda item 8, annual survey. Shane.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of the inputs into the budget setting process to consider tonight. Just pick out one or two highlights. There's a lot of detail in the appendix, so members are free to look at that in more detail at their leisure. But just tonight, in terms of presenting the report, 2 or 3 things to note. Again, enhancing and sustaining our beautiful city for future generations remains the top priority for most people, although there has been a slight increase in terms of prosperous city and healthy and active, so perhaps a bit more emphasis on well-being that's come through into the survey this time round. In terms of overall satisfaction, we've reached a point where we are, back to 57%, which is the highest that it has been throughout the time that we've been doing this, except for that 1 year during the COVID years when there was a lot of emphasis on councils providing facilities for people to help through that. So that's really good progress. The second year in a row we've seen that progress. And for the first time, we've seen satisfaction scores improve for 12 services overall, 3 of which have now improved for 3 years on a row. And picking up the point that Pat made earlier, customer service centres is one of those. So most of those are around ways in which we engage with the public. So it's really good to see those improvements happening there. I'll skip over the information about levels of spending and popular projects, because we'll come back to that when we look at the budget report, and just finally focus on the last section, which is around access to online services and influencing council's decisions. And it is noticeable that now we're increasingly in a position where people are interacting with the council through electronic means and taking part in consultation events and so on. But for the first time, speaking to my councillor has been the highest means that people have identified for influencing council decisions. So there seems to be a trend towards closer engagement, and people are now seeing that as more effective. So although 52% of people still feel they can't influence council decisions, it was 62% 2 years ago. So there's a significant change in the way that has come about. So those are some of the things that struck me in responding to the results. They will be feeding into the budget report, which we'll come back to later. But if there's anything that members want to clarify or comment on, then I'm happy to answer any questions if I can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Shane. Questions or comment? Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the report at 4.0, I've just lost my place, sorry. In terms of access and engagement, when we're talking about more people accessing surveys online, I'm concerned at the risk of excluding a section of our community, those who are visually impaired and those who have accessibility needs and unable to access the internet for one reason or another. I just wonder whether we need to be looking more as a council to make sure that sections of our society are not excluded from engagement. What my vision is that Worcester should be inclusive and accessible to all. So not everybody can access the internet and do these online surveys. And I wonder what the officers' views are on that, please.
Okay. Oh, through you, Chair. I think there's always a question of how do we respond best to the demand that's there. So what the survey is tending to show is that there is a drift towards more electronic engagement, and so we need to respond to that and interact accordingly. But it is a recognised feature of a lot of the discussions we've had over the years that we don't want to marginalise any groups. And so we always, for instance, this survey, make sure that we do have hard copies available and we put them in places where they can be accessed. And we're also conscious of the ways in which we can use our online facilities and make them accessible as well to people with particular requirements. And there is work that is regularly underway about how we can use our website and our other facilities to make sure that they're as accessible as possible. So there are actions that we can do in respect of that as well. So it's a well understood point and well recognised one, and we do try as far as possible to ensure that we continue to include everybody as much as we can through our processes. And of course, every report that comes to committee has that opportunity to say, is it inclusive? Are we recognising the protected characteristics and so on that we need to engage with? And other officers may want to comment more, but I could only give the assurance that we try as far as we can to always be inclusive with this kind of activity. Thank you. Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Coming to the P&R report in March is the year-end progress report on the EDI strategy, and looking ahead into year 3, one of the planned projects is Accessible Worcester. I'll put some detail in and come and present to committee about that, to try and convene in the right places and spaces a conversation about how accessible Worcester is. Because we do have some good conversations going now with particular individuals and groups of charities, but we haven't convened that conversation ourselves as a city council. People have come to us and we've gone to individuals, groups or individuals. And we do think it's an area where there will be things we can improve and do differently. And we see that there's a need, in the same way that we've convened some other conversations and summits and forums, there's a real opportunity for us to try and convene and coordinate that conversation, because there are lots of different nuances, as you know, about what people want and expect. And there are certain things that the City Council can do and show leadership on itself as a City Council, and other things that are beyond our reach because they sit with other people or other organisations. So I'm just wanted to reassure you that under the working title Accessible Worcester, as a sort of questioning ourselves and checking and making it a year 3 priority, that is coming in the EDI strategy in March.
Any further questions or comment? Pat, and then Robin, sorry.
Thank you for that, Sean. I'd like to thank you actually for the fact that you helped to make something more accessible recently when I brought an issue to you. And it was a complex issue, it was nuanced, and I won't go into detail because it's really quite sensitive. But the fact that you went out to see somebody made a real difference to the resolution of that, so thank you. Regarding the papers we have before us, I'm looking at 4.14, and it seems to me that residents do find it harder. They really do find it harder to get a resolution when they're raising an issue or problem. I think it's not the council's particular fault on it. It's something that happens when you're online in it. Anyway, you are slightly faceless, aren't you? And that in a way, it doesn't quite anonymise people, but it actually keeps them at arm's length in a way that often makes that resolution difficult. So we need to consider that, I think, quite seriously, and when it's appropriate, and what we do about addressing those nuances for people. Usually that's when they come to their councillors, in fact.
Thank you, Chair. Particularly interested in the responses to question 5, especially the least well-known projects, including the Mecco Memorial Park, Worcester Life Stories, and paradoxically, civil enforcement officers stepping up their nighttime appearances, which also is one of the least liked projects. I'm just wondering if we're going to see something come out about lessons learned about publicising the good works that we do. So the things like Mecco Peace Park, although people don't know about them, will become a valuable resource in that area of the city.
So, to the recommendation, merely that we note the content. Sorry, Steve Cochran.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the demographic data that you've supplied for the annual survey, I mean, I was heightened to see that there's quite a high proportion of respondents that identify as having a long-term health problem or a disability, 18.2%, compared to the census data of 3.6% of the Worcester population. I have a question about ethnicity data because it says 2022, 2021. I presume those figures are not 2022, 21, they are 23, 22, yeah? So if you just look at the ethnicity data, you can see an issue there comparing it to the Worcester census, which is that 91% of respondents were English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish or British, when the census data says that 82% of the population of Worcester are in that category. So ethnic minorities are quite significantly underrepresented in the annual survey. And I wonder how we can address that to ensure that the voice of the ethnic minorities are heard.
Through you, Chair. Yes, Steve, I mean, the profile of responses have always been, that order, and it's something that we've constantly tried to find different ways of doing it. We do publish the surveys in 3 different languages and make them available. And we continue to try and promote it through various means. It's published the draft in December, in the autumn, and ask members then at that stage if they have opportunities to present the survey to the community groups and seek responses. So we continue to work on it and try to find a profile of responses that we know more closely matches the demographics of the city, and we'll continue to work on that. And I'm open to any suggestions as how we might do that, and we'll keep trying to find ways of doing it. Yeah. But ultimately, it's self-serving. Those people who want to respond will respond, and we have to present the information that comes from the respondents as it is.
I think we're all done. So everyone happy to note? Thank you. Thank you. So to agenda item 9, fees and charges 24-25. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. This is another part of the budget setting process where the council reviews its fees and charges for the coming year. Needless to say, there's a lot of detail in this in the appendix. This has already been reviewed by the Income Management Committee, and it's been forwarded to this committee. The covering report notes that their particular comments and proposals in paragraphs 3.3 and 3.4, which is around the allotments charges and in particular the concessions. In terms of the general fees and charges, the approach was to put most of them where the council is allowed to by an estimated rates of inflation, for which we use 6%. Those that haven't increased are because they're set statutory, so planning, for instance, and some of the licensing fees. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on any of the specific detail or the...
Mark, any questions or comment, please? Stephen Hodgson.
Yeah, just a simple one, really. Not so much about the fees rising, because unfortunately, we have to increase fees to match costs. But really, page 121, where the writing is extremely small and very, very difficult to read. In future, could we have these documents that are actually legible?
Chair, I think that there are some limitations about how the information is imported and uploaded onto our publishing tool, modern.gov. But I will pick this up as part of our accessibility review. And given that we are still positively predisposed to paper, I think we do need a solution that meets the expectations on paper as well.
Any further questions or comment? Okay, we'll just go around the table. Lynn Denham, Pat Agar, Jessie and Eleanor.
Thank you. Mine was a question around in paragraph 3.2 that the trade waste fees are still under review pending receipt of the waste disposal charges from the county council. So we are part of an interlinked system. I wonder, when is that expected? And when will we be able to set a reliable fee that does cover the costs?
Through you, Chair. I'm afraid this is an apology. That comment is a hangover from last year's report, which should have been removed. The report that went to Income Generation noted that whilst we're still due to receive those fees and charges from the County Council, the proposal is to nevertheless increase the trade waste fees. I can't talk about the specifics of that because it's obviously commercially sensitive, but the services view is unless the County Council do something particularly unusual with their fees, that we're safe to set hours without waiting for them, which from a procedural point of view, I think is a much better way of doing it than the way we used to. So my apologies for that comment still being there.
Thank you. Just to remind everyone that there is an exempt paper around this, so should you wish to make comment on that, an opportunity will be there later in the agenda. But by all means, anything that falls under the traditional white papers, please feel free to bring it to the table. Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 114, and the hire of spaces, around the city. I'm a bit concerned. As the Armed Forces champion, I'm very concerned to know that the Worcestershire Regiment, which actually has the freedom of the city, in fact, would not be charged for their commemorative events, particularly things like Gallivelt, the Battle of Gallivelt and so forth, which they hold in Gallivelt Park, and the Royal British Legion, of course, who come here to commemorate the dead and so forth. I presume we aren't going to charge them for that.
Chair, I think given that we've supported those causes up till now with no charge, and given the commitment from this council to the Armed Forces Covenant, then I'm not seeing any disagreement. We wouldn't seek to charge moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, many thanks. Jessie Jagger.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment about the increases in fees and allotments. I understand that this is not up for discussion, or that this decision has already been made. Just want to pass on some of the comments that I've had from residents, and there seems to be a lot of issues regarding the perceived lack of value for money in terms of the service and the level of services that some allotment holders feel they're getting, compared to how much the increase is taking place. There were issues beforehand, before the increase, and I think the increase has compounded that perception. And I think that there has to be some work done in terms of communication and trying to find a way of addressing those concerns that some of the allotment holders, because I think a lot of them have been contacting us and through different methods, and this seems to be a very contentious issue.
Thanks. Who are we looking at? Is it Eleanor? Sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just looking at the report, I just realised, I'm not sure if officers are aware, on page 139, the High Edge concessions list isn't up to date. I know we updated the list before when we were looking for the allotments, but it hasn't been updated on this aspect of the concessions. Can that be done?
Through you,
the response is yes.
Chair, what is presented here is the report as it was presented to Income Management Committee. So any recommendations which now go on to Council will incorporate any changes which were agreed at that committee. So the changes in terms of the concessions and the qualifications to receive the concessions will be presented in the Council report. Sorry, Mark's going to contradict me.
For probably the first time, I am. I think Councillor Round's point is that the concession change was made on the allotments page, and that was presented to Income Management, but we've omitted to make the same change to the High Hedge page, and yes, we will now do that.
My apologies. One way or another, it will go in the Council report.
Karen Lewing.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regards to the Gallivelt Sons of Rest building. I go to the stakeholder meetings, and what we think, everyone on the board, we talked about it last time that we were there, that it's £30 to rent quite a small room. And we went back to officers to ask whether people were actually renting it, and even whether it was easy to rent it. When we went on the website, it wasn't clear how people rent it. And we asked whether that sum could be reviewed with the amount of potential lettings that we're having, because some people have said to us that £30 for such a small space is actually means that they're not booking it, because similar spaces that are much bigger are cheaper. Thank you.
Chair, I've picked this issue up with officers more generally about the extent or the lack of extent of lettings in both Gallivelt and Cripplegate. So it is something we want to look at during 24-25. I'm not going to suggest that officers can come up with an alternative fee tonight, but it may be that what we can commit to is officers to go away over the next couple of months and review the fees and charges for letting those two buildings and bring something back to Income Management Committee for consideration.
Good. Any further questions, Marjorie?
Thank you, Chair. A lot of these fees have gone up by 6%, but excuse me, I've noticed that on page 144 of the printed papers, the charges for the penalties for landlords that rent a property with an F4G EPC rating have not gone up, and I was wondering why that was, because it's a really serious thing to be letting a property that is not properly insulated.
Chair, I'd have to double check, but I'm 99.9% sure that because that is a charge that's set nationally, we have no discretion over it. So we've also got some licensing fees, which is similar. You'll see that there's no increase.
Yeah.
So I believe Mark is nodding. It's a nationally set fee, which we have no discretion over.
Okay, thank you.
Adrian.
Joe, on page 129, hire of city centre space, the commercial charges for hiring seem to have gone down. It looks as though they're probably the only ones that have gone down across the board. I just wondered what the logic was behind that.
I think we'll have to provide a written response on that one, Adrian, if that's okay.
Further contributions? Steve Cochrane.
It's just a small point about the changes to allotment charges, as mentioned in 3.15. So we've agreed that the increase has been agreed for the 24-25 financial year. Just to point out that the allotment charging cycle is actually from October to September, so the fees don't actually increase until the 1st of October 2024. Just for reassurance of allotment holders and information for members.
I think that was a statement rather than a question, but yeah, Councillor Cochrane is absolutely correct.
Good, excellent. Right, I'm not seeing any further hands or indications of wishing to contribute. So the recommendation is that the committee receives a report and recommends it to full council for approval on the 20th of February. Those in favour? Those against? Abstentions? Okay. Beg your pardon. Yes. Two.
No, two.
No, I wasn't. I was probably slightly obscured. Sorry about that. Okay, right. We move on to agenda item 10. Before Shane introduces the agenda items 10 and 11, actually, Councillor Murray has indicated that she wishes to make a contribution, which I've happily consented to. So, Sarah, you have 5 minutes when you're ready and seated at the table.
Thank you, Chair. And it won't take me 5 minutes, it's just very brief. I just wanted to convey my thanks for the prompt response to the concerns that were outlined in my motion to Council in November. I'm encouraged by the collaborative efforts demonstrated in tackling our environmental challenges. While acknowledging the progress made, I remain mindful that we will need to keep on top of this. I'm pleased that this plan is prioritising and addressing the risk of harm and the financial consequences that this would entail. With the arrival of spring, officers will have the opportunity
to thoroughly evaluate the tree canopies and the extent of the damage, providing a valuable insight to guide our decision-making process. The introduction of an annual review underscores our commitment to continuous vigilance and adaptability, marking a positive step forward. I'm committed to upholding the commitments outlined in the plan and maintaining a watchful eye on our progress. I urge the endorsement of the recommendations put forward by the Environment Committee, emphasising the importance of supporting their budget request. Their request aligns with our collective aspirations for what needs to be done at this stage. This collaborative is a starting point for tackling this crisis. So I just wanted to thank you all for your attention and dedication to our shared objectives. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I believe we're going to link items 10 and 11 together. I'll pass to Shane and all will become clear.
Thank you, Chair. You have so much confidence in me. We have done this in the past, in fact, because there's information in relation to item 11, which is relevant to item 10. So I'll take them together and we can have a discussion about both reports and then revert to recommendations in respect to each individual one. So in terms of item 10, we've been through the process of talking to each of the policy committees following the December draft budget, and that has involved consideration of a number of items which might be brought forward for inclusion in the budget. Now, this year has only brought forward items which are one-offs, so none of these items will have a direct impact on the council tax setting process for this year because they'll all be taken from reserves as a short-term one-off element of funding. There are 4 that ultimately have been brought forward. The first was from Environment Committee regarding gall mitigation. Now we have within the existing revenue budget £36,000 every year to mitigate the gall problem, but annually consider whether or not there should be any additional resources added to that. And this year, the committee considered a number, but in the end agreed that the key thing was to carry out a survey because that will help us understand if the measures we're taking are good measures and inform future work as well as applications for licenses. So that was 4,700. The Environment Committee at its subsequent meeting also considered the ash dieback problem. We've had a series of reports around this over the past year or so. And while there is still much that can be done with the existing budgets, the conclusion was that at certain times we need specialist support to engage with that, and estimates were made as to how much support we might need during the course of the year. And the resulting figure was that up to £65,000 was a reasonable estimate of what might be needed to bring in that specialist work as and when we're required to do it. And Communities Committee considered a report in respect to the work of Worcester Play Council, which recommended that funding which had been provided previously was no longer provided. That was accepted by the committee, but the chair proposed that £10,000 be set aside to support youth play activities. So no decision was made about how that might be distributed, but simply to create a reserve from funds. And just to be clear, this isn't a transfer of £15,000 which was there and was disappearing. They're one-off items for 1 year only. So this is a creation of a new funding pot for £10,000 for 1 year to support youth play activities. So as to how that would be distributed will be a subject to a later report to the committee. And then finally, Councillor Denham has proposed that we renew the £1,000 member community support allowance. Taking those together, that amounts to 114,700, and we have no specific reserve that we could take those from, so they would have to be derived from the risk reserve. And as paragraph 3.3 suggests, given what we have currently on that reserve and existing commitments, that would leave a balance on that reserve of 1.334 million. And as paragraph 3.4 points out, that would leave us less in that reserve than the council has previously decided was the amount we need to mitigate future losses. Now, bear that in mind as we move on to the next item, because the budget report for this year, we have, well, I'll start off with that. Members will be aware that the government announced that there is an additional amount of funding. We very recently had that information through, and it appears at first sight that that will bring in for us an extra 113,000, which is more or less the amount of the items in the previous report. Hence the value in taking these things together. So we can see that actually, if we were to fund those items from that additional funding, then the expected deficit which we're posting in this budget of £452,000 would remain, and there would be sufficient in our earmark reserves to cover that and still leave 1.4 million, which is our previous decision in terms of risk. I know I'm getting a little bit cart before horse there, so just to step back again, the budget report itself has been a very long exercise this year. We've worked really, really hard to get ourselves in a position where we can produce a budget which is manageable within the reserves that we've got. Obviously, the key points I have to mention is this does include a 2.99% increase in council tax, which is proposed, and it does incorporate all of the items which were put forward in respect of price inflation, including 6% in respect of car parking, and all the other items that are included in there. One thing that I've tried to do this year, which had often been in my mind to do, we haven't really done enough, was to emphasise the extent to which the budget reflects those findings of the annual survey. So the table at 5.5, I've tried to gather all the things that we are doing, and actually, when you do try to pull them all together, it's quite an astonishing amount of work that's there being committed, and resources are committed to do all the things that we need to do to further the council's wider objectives. So I think it's important to reflect on that, and also some of the other strategies which have come forward in the last year. The Housing Enabled strategy, the Play Plan, of course, which are big step forwards. These are things we're also supporting by dedicating additional resources to those. So I think the budget that we've developed is one which reflects what the council is trying to do. I think it reflects what the people in the city say they want us to do. And I think ultimately the key thing is that it's affordable within the resources that we've got. Of course, having said all of that, the medium-term financial plan does show that a budget gap will begin to continue to open up just as long as increases in costs exceed increases in income. So we will be back next year having another attempt to identify ways in which we can reduce costs, increase income, and get ourselves into a position where those two things are fully in line. But for the moment, I'm happy to recommend the budget to members to approve this evening for recommendation on to council on the 20th of February. Thank you.
Shane, thank you. Questions or comments, please? Karen Lewin and then Stephen Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to talk about the £10,000 for youth play provision, please. I watched the Communities Committee the other day, and what I'm trying to understand is that I know that you say that it's normally an annual amount of 15,000, and that's what we've been used to. And if this is £10,000, we know what £15,000 got us. So are we saying that £10,000 is enough money to align with our objectives of the play plan, or is it just it will do something but we don't know what yet? And actually, is that enough money, or is it just a little bit of money to do something that makes us feel better about not doing enough? So where's the strategy behind the £10,000? We've paid a lot of money for a play plan, and I want to know whether the £10,000 will meet any of the objectives in the play plan at all, and actually whether what we should be doing is looking at putting more money in. Thank you.
Okay, Lloyd?
Chair, if I can sort of disconnect the sum of money from the play plan first of all, the previous grant was given to Worcester Play Council to do three things. One was to provide play opportunities for communities, particularly those hard to reach communities. Part of it was to go out and seek grant funding from third parties, and then the third part was to apply that grant funding to increase play opportunities. The part of the sum that was passported on to Purdeswell Young People's Club was around £5,000. So that was the element we were absolutely sure was dedicated to providing play provision in terms of play activity to hard to reach communities. So that is why I think the recommendation was for £10,000. So just to give a bit more than that five, to be able to sort of deploy that for next year, and whether that be Purdeswell Young People's Club or another organisation, we feel that will provide some continuity around direct play activity during those summer months.
Okay, so just to clarify, this will be a sum that people can apply for, and we will have an expectation of what will be delivered through like a service delivery, and that different people will apply for it as much as they would as if it was a grant.
So I think, as Shane said, the process is yet to be worked out, but what we envisage is that this will be an application process, and we will be seeking activity that delivers direct play opportunities for hard-to-reach communities. That seems like a sensible approach.
Stephen Hodgson.
Yes, I've got two questions. The first lot is really regarding the ash dieback thing, which I abstained on the strategy, because although it's important we have a strategy, I do not think the £65,000 budget is anywhere near what we're actually going to require during this year. And the reason why I base this on is because there was a table published in the report that described the proportion of ash trees between the first pre-April 2023 and September 2023. Now, if you take those 153 days approximately, we had a decrease of 5% of our tree stock being healthy, no signs of infection, and we had an increase of highly infected from virtually none to 5%. So if you project that into the coming financial year, it's obviously going to be interesting, because I think we need to look at, when we do the canopy survey in the spring, we could potentially have about 13% trees which are not infected. It's a slight reduction, but more alarmingly, we could have 9% of our trees being highly infected, and by the end of the summer season, we could be up to 20% of our trees being highly infected. So I think, we do need to be very, very careful. I think we need to be prepared to spend more than £65,000 for these particular trees, because these trees are getting worse as we actually speak. And now, I'm not a tree expert, so using these figures, obviously trees might necessarily decline at a constant rate, or maybe always decline at different times during the year. But I think we do have to be mindful that if we look at that figures we've actually been given, we are talking about a degrading which will create problems, and I'm just concerned that we could be caught short of funds during the year. So will there be a mean that if we have to spend more than 65,000k, potentially 100k for example, will we be in a position to do that if we have to spend the money to do it?
Lloyd?
Through you, Chair, just in terms of the where we are at the moment. So what we've got at the moment is a position which is affordable. So I'd recommend that, as far as this evening, that we focus on whether or not we want to commit those resources, and that then the Environment Committee will no doubt want to continue to monitor the situation and bring forward any further requests for funding as need be. As I've said in my report, I think we've got enough to meet our current our estimates are robust, and there is enough in reserves to meet contingencies should they apply. So we'll have the opportunity to reconsider that, but that needs detailed reports back to the committee for recommendation on.
Many thanks. The second question, Stephen.
Yeah, the second question is about the second report, really. And having been on this council for a number of years, on page 1A3, about the Lobo loan, which we've talked about many times over the year, and there's obviously a lot of benefit of hindsight, whether not a good method of actually borrowing money in that. I notice it says in this that with interest rates being at a high level, the Lobo has two potential call-in dates during the next financial year with interest rate, and there's a fair chance we could actually they could exercise their option. And if they do, the council will take the option to repay the loan at no cost and replace it with a shorter dated loan. Is the view of the officers that this would actually be a good thing if the lender did actually exercise their right? Because I think, we've been looking at wanting to not have this particular loan, but we've sort of been subject to it because of the high penalties of actually getting out of it. what is your view on this?
Any light to be thrown?
Through you, Chair, it's very rare that Mark is more optimistic than me in these matters, so I'm going to let him answer that question.
Oh, thank you. I think you summed it up when, as you said, the report notes that if the lender chooses to exercise the option, and if they do, on balance, it would be good. But I suspect that given the history we've had in the past with this loan, that they won't choose to exercise it and we'll still be running with it.
Any further questions? Marjorie?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak about the Member Ward Community Support Funds. We all want to support our communities, and I understand that. But by having a system like this, where each member gets £1,000, we're not taking account of the fact that there are different levels of need in the city. And I think there might be a better way of meeting this requirement. And I'd also like to comment that I believe that in previous years, not all of the money has been spent, which is inefficient if the money is just returned back to the main coffer when it was money intended for community. So I think there might be a better way of doing this. Possibly the money could be added to the community fund. I would imagine that there's a lot of crossover between the kind of people who come to council as asking for money and those who also go ask for money from the community support fund.
I mean, I take your point. I personally feel it's something of a triumph that it's still with us. It may not have been the case, you know. Things like this tend to be sort of lost in the sort of bookkeeping, if you like, for want of a better way of describing it. And I think it's something that, you know, councillors do in the main spend quite wisely. And yes, some wards have distinct problems, but I think, as I say, I think I think councillors spend it quite wisely. So I think it's good to see it there. Any further comment? Ellen around, and then back to Marjorie.
Thank you. Just in terms of the member ward community funds, do we have any monitoring of this as to how we're spending it as ward councillors? So if there's any sort of feedback or anything, sort of any reports done to council?
Defer to Shane there.
Through you, Chair. No, we don't publish that. And we did make a commitment when it was first established to publish it when the scheme ended. But of course, the scheme hasn't yet ended because it's been renewed each year. I'm happy to produce a report to council on the details of the spend that's been incurred to date. But the way the scheme has been established has been very much about individual ownership by members at ward level. So there is minimal amount of engagement in that process from officers. It's really about individual members making individual decisions for their own wards. And it's managed at that level. But I'm happy to provide more information if members would seek that.
Yeah. Ellen, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just thinking, because at the moment we're looking at the budget and the finances, and we've got difficulties with finances and balancing our budget. And if members of the public can see that we've got £35,000 coming out the budget, they're going to think, well, actually, what are they spending this money on? Why are they you know, they're not going to understand, you know, what the use is for it. And I just wondered that we might be criticised as councillors for spending this money when we're really struggling as a council as a whole financially.
Marjorie, do you want to come back?
Yes, just to say that I do have concerns similar to what Eleanor just said about us spending this money when we're struggling to balance the books.
I'm sure Lynn, and then Adrian, and then Robin and Bashars.
Since the item is in my name, I feel an obligation to defend. Councillors in my group have found it extremely useful. It's a relatively small pot of money per councillor, there is a level of monitoring in the sense that any application, any request for disbursement of funds is checked by an officer. It isn't just an automatic open check. So there is some checks at that point.
Sorry, Lynn, without wishing to interrupt, can I just confirm that officer is me? Okay.
And he's very good at these things. I've lost my train of thought now. So actually, it is very small amounts of money can actually make a big difference in our communities or to community projects. And by putting, to take it into a central pot adds a level of bureaucracy and a level of size around it. If not all members choose to use it, then that is a saving at the end of the year. I mean, I don't have a problem with, of publicising where the money has gone and where it's been spent on. I guess there's a level of caution about adding officer time and bureaucracy to what is designed to be a very low bureaucracy system. But those funds are valued by communities and are valued by councillors that we can help, individual projects that make a difference.
Chair, I was just going to say that the county council has a similar system with an awful lot more money in its divisional funds for councillors, and for many years people have come to us as city councillors asking for money for various things, which because we know the patch and know the local area best, it feels like we're in a good position to be able to assist and make get over those small hurdles, as Lynn suggests. So I think it's something that's welcomed by organisations and individuals. It's not generally used for, it's not like the welfare grant scheme, it's not like the community grant scheme. It's applied for other criteria. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to keep going as long as we can afford to do so.
Thank you, Chair. We were talking about hard-to-reach communities with place strategy earlier. We in St John's have used this money predominantly in Dines Green, which is one of those hard-to-reach communities. And these are people that don't see the councillors working for them, whereas councillors can come along, trot up, listen to their needs, and at least put some investment from the council into that. So I think this is a worthwhile fund. And I'm always grateful to Shane for reminding me when we in St John's go overdrawn. So, I strongly recommend that, that this is a worthwhile pot of money for councillors to use within their wards.
Thank you, Bashar.
Thank you, Chair. Members Ward Community Support Fund is really important. That does help. Through this fund, I was able to help 12 women to learn about basic IT skills. And I was able to contribute the children, the families to go to Wester-super-Mare. And I think those deprived families, areas, there was no other scheme there where I could apply for specific families to target those in need. So this was the best option. So, compared to county councils, county councillors 10,000 and 1,000, I think we should increase it. If the money is not used, that's still our money, and we can use it somewhere else if it's like saved for other things. Thank you.
Many thanks. I guess the only thing I can add to that is in the new year, if members who have concerns about the scheme want to bring it to the appropriate committee for adjustment and increased transparency, whatever, then there's an opportunity to do that. Obviously, myself and Lynn are county councillors, and there is a page on the website where you can see how we spend our divisional funds. And it may very well be that you choose to introduce something similar here in due course should the scheme go on. Sean?
Just as a note of procedure, there is an internal audit that's already been conducted on the process that's used to allocate these grants. So that will be coming to the Audit and Governance Committee in any event very shortly. So if that was a mechanism to recommend improvements, that's coming in any event.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say I'm not trying to be difficult saying I'm against the scheme at all. I think it's great, and we've all spent it on very, very worthy causes. It was just the concern about with the budget being as it is. But I mean, yeah, if the money's available to spend in my community, fantastic. I can spend it on some brilliant projects, and I can reach parts of my community that are fully deserving. So it was just that concern about balancing the budget that I was a bit concerned about.
Okay, it's fair enough. Any further questions or comment? Lynn Denham.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to say, well done to officers and to everyone in the budget position that we are looking at, that this draft budget looks doable, and there's a huge amount of work that's gone into that. It is a pause for thought, looking at paragraph 4.3 and the increasing budget gap, looking in financial years ahead, 2025 and beyond. The fact that central government is kind of dripping out announcements and bits and pieces, and it feels like the sort of third announcement, and we're kind of all really hoping that actually there's going to be a further announcement, possibly in the spring budget, because we haven't yet heard about the household support fund. So, which would make a huge difference to the most deprived communities, those most struggling within the city. If we don't get an equivalent amount of household support fund, then that's 200,000 that we don't have to support people. So, yeah. It's really difficult to weigh up the priorities, and extremely difficult to plan when we haven't got long-term funding and support and sustainability from central government. If I could just ask a question with regard to looking at paragraph 4.2. So that's reducing the training budget and the sort of the vacancy factor. I just wonder to what extent there's an impact of the reduction in headcount of the number of people that we employ, given the redundancy programme that's just been completed.
Well, through you, Chair, yes, it's been a sort of extensive process of trying to re-establish services in ways which can be accommodated within the budgets, and the legacy of that will remain for a while. We've got to come back and revisit that, so there will be further proposals coming forward in terms of how we might restructure and find ways in which we can do things differently. So really the only answer I can give is that's an ongoing process, so we're going to continue to keep things like training, and we had quite a long talk this morning in our leadership team about how do we find ways to support staff through this process as well, and make sure that we've got the skills and capacity we need to carry things forward. So those are they're ongoing issues, and it's by no means the end of that journey. There's quite a long way to go yet. So we'll have to keep all of those things under review. And of course, we have our annual staff survey, which gives us a temperature check on how people are feeling at the moment and what their concerns are. And we're about to go through a process of working closely with the management team across the council in addressing the findings of the latest version of that. So there is an ongoing process of understanding exactly what this means in terms of the changes we're making to make sure we can continue to deliver services in an affordable way. And at the same time continue to support staff to do the best job that they can.
Excellent, thank you. Any further comment before we go to the recommendations? No, right. So just 1 second. All right, so excuse me, agenda item 10, simply that the committee considers the proposed amendments to the draft budget for the financial year, medium-term financial plan, and recommends to council items to be included. Everyone content with item 10? Okay, thank you very much. To item 11, the proposed budget. Now, obviously, there's quite a significant recommendation here. So I'm just for the sake of clarity as we go forward, just deal with them one by one. 1.1, that the committee endorses the proposed budget. Show of hands, please. Those in favour? Against? And abstentions? 1.2, the committee confirms in accordance with the local authorities. I'm sure this has all been read. Again, please just indicate that you're in favour of that, please. 1.3, indicate in favour, please. 1.4, again, those in favour. And 1.5, indicate if you're in favour, please. Against and abstentions. Okay, happy to move on to agenda item 12, Future High Street Fund Programme Workstream Updates.
Bear with me, I'm just doing the IT. Normally I'm crawling under the table.
And David.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a lengthy report. I won't go through it line by line. I'll just draw members' attention to certain elements. Shall I pause as a couple of members have just left the room?
It might have been an appropriate time actually to give members a 5-minute break. We've still got at least half of the paper, so forgive me, 10 minutes. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to grab a coffee or use the facilities, please do so.
I was like a coiled spring then. Yeah.
awkward way in which we got to at the break, but one more time, Future High Street Fund programme work stream updates. David.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is a long and detailed report. I will assume that members have had the opportunity to read through it in detail, so I won't go through every element. I will just draw out, comment on the various sections. So in section 3.1, you'll note that the committee approved various recommendations in July regarding the commissioning of further work subject to ongoing dialogue with DLUC, the commencement of a process for an independently led consultation, and making a resubmission or amendment to our planning application. And then paragraph 3.2, note that the members authorise the continuation of the design work at REBA stage 2 and 3. If I then just move on, in terms of where we are now in terms of configuration, 3.4 sets out where we are now in terms of the design of the facility, with the 3 studio spaces, the box, the stage and the screen. And then if I just move on, note that in the penultimate bullet point there is reference to the Corn Exchange, and there is the proposal that we will continue to offer a food and beverage facility, but also then to make the point that the final bullet point, we will now plan to leave the existing public toilets facility in place. If I move on, paragraph 3.6, you will note that we have now submitted the planning application in accordance with the scheme layout that I've just referenced above, and we're hoping to get a decision in a not too distant future, in the next couple of months. If I then move on to section 3.7, technical design, you'll see that the proposal now is to proceed to REBA stage 4, and that will help us in terms of firming up final costs, working with our cost consultants and our preferred construction partner. And in paragraph 311 to 313, you'll see that with regards to that preferred contractor, the recommendation is now that we enter into a pre-construction services agreement. And I won't go into any particular detail. I'm sure you can read through the content. Moving on, in terms of the next element, is the proposed operating model, and that is set out in paragraphs 314 through to 319. Members will know that further to the independently led stakeholder engagement process, we have now engaged with a number of local arts organisations to form a consortium, and that work is progressing. To note in paragraph 319, which will come back to the recommendations in a moment, the proposal is for an enabling budget of £80,000 to fund the continuing work to the development of the business plan, and this will be drawn from the council's master plan reserve. That's the Scala. If I move on to the public realm, you will see throughout the city now that we are just at the almost end of phase 5, which is the Foregate Street works. And I think it's all looking pretty impressive, if I may say so. The final phase is phase 6, and we are awaiting final design costs. And if there are any final variances against overall budget, once we have those costs finalised, we will bring back a report to members. And that work will be planned for later this year. The next project within the Future High Streets programme is Section 5, the Property Enhancement Scheme. I will simply draw members' attention to the fact that a total of 14 grants have been awarded so far, and the value of the grants is some £3,790. That, of course, is matched with private sector contributions from landlords and tenants. And I think anybody who's been up and down Angel Street recently will see the quality of the work that's done, and a number of those particularly shabby retail units are now in a position where we're hoping that they will be relet shortly, and also the upper floors, we're hoping that they will be occupied, whether that is for residential or commercial purposes. The next element of the programme is Angel Place, paragraphs 6.1 through to 6.5. You will note that earlier on we appointed a team of architects led by McGregor Coxall to undertake a detailed urban design, and part of that work was a stakeholder engagement process. We've understandably paused that piece of work in order to ensure that once we finalise it, it links properly with the uses within the Scala. This is I think one of the team described this as the patio for the Scala at one of our planning meetings, and that is a pretty reasonable description of what we're trying to achieve. So until we were sure of what we wanted to do with the Scala, which is now reflected in the current planning application, we had to pause this work. We are now recommencing this work, as stated in paragraph 6.5, and proposing to take this through to RIBA stage 4. And once we have options available, it's an omission in the report, but just to assure members, we will bring back any future recommendations in terms of options to members regarding that space. And then the final element is number 8, Angel Street. You'll see there that in paragraph 7.1 through to 7.4, we have been out to the market and we have received 4 offers. That detail forms part of an exempt appendix. And so if members wish to discuss that, we can go into closed session, at which point I would invite my colleague, Kevin, to talk about the property element. The only other thing I would draw members' attention to in closing is paragraph 10.3, where we have set out a number of risks. Careful consideration has been given to the risk register and mitigating these risks. There is still a risk that continued cost inflation will impact on the final construction. So until we get to RIBA stage 4 and have final discussions with our contractor, Spiller Metcalfe, there is always the risk that the budget will increase. Within the programme, we have set aside significant contingencies, both in terms of fees and construction costs, to cover any increase. So we think we've done as best we can to mitigate those risks. You will also see that there is a risk in the agreement of the extension with the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. However, an extension has been agreed in principle, subject to the agreement of the proposed construction programme. And of course, any additional delay created by further changes could impact delivery and completion of the revised project. So I just wanted to make sure that members were aware of the risks outlined in section 10.3 and to provide some reassurance that these have been uppermost in officers' minds. At that point, I will stop and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
David, many thanks. Obviously, as David's pointed out, 1.4 is covered by an exempt paper. So, I mean, what seems to me to be the most sensible way of doing this is if members feel that there are aspects of the exempt paper that inform that part of the discussion, then we can have a discussion around the elements that are in the white paper and then simply go to an exempt session to discuss just that one element of Angel Street and then return for the recommendations. I'm happy to take questions or comment on that. David, Adrian, sorry.
Sorry, just on that issue, Chair. What can I talk about the wider thing?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about Angel Street in terms of, recommendation 1.4, absolutely fine. If members want to take it into the depth of the information that's contained within the pink paper, then we can simply just pause just on that and take.
Okay, Chair. Well, I mean, I'm comfortable with what's in the pink paper, so I've personally nothing to raise on that. No. And I'm also pleased to see the development of the report, because I thought there was one time there was a certain amount of scepticism and criticism that was we would not even get to this stage. So pleased to see that that's progressing. Thanks also to staff for a tour of the building, or second tour, or maybe actually a third tour, I think, of the building last week or the week before. David's answered a couple of the questions I had in advance, so that's cool. The one I'd got, though, was in relation to the operating model for the Arts Centre. And I just wondered what thought has been given to the extent of council involvement in that. Is it going to be totally standalone? Is it going to be hands, kind of arm's length? Are we going to get involved with officers or councillors? Have we got any thoughts on that or any developed plans? And if not, are we going to have an opportunity to discuss those? David.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Chair. Yes, the business plan will be brought back to members before we let the construction contract. So we hope we will be in a position where we can give members confidence in the business case before we let the construction contract. In terms of other points, we need to work out some of that detail in terms of ultimately whether it becomes a standalone business or whether it remains within the auspices of the council, and I think that's work to be done. I'd like to invite Sian to comment, because Sian has been leading on the detailed discussions with the consulted members, if I may. Thank you.
Of course, Sian.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, just to sort of show some of our workings at the moment, there are some obvious benefits in establishing a charitable organisation before the time that the construction contract is finished and the building opens, because members will be aware that charitable status is beneficial for a number of funding applications and in terms of generally the financial treatment of a new organisation. So that's a consideration. At the same time, we are brokering a really fruitful sort of set of discussions amongst a set of organisations, arts organisations, creative organisations in the city, who have a track record of working together, but not all 6 of them around the table at the same time. So joining up them together as a collective and understanding the council's role, ultimately wanting to be in a sort of enabling role in terms of, you know, we're not leading arts commissioners. We need to be in a position where we have an enabling and supporting role as regards infrastructure and building and so forth as a landlord. But understanding that journey from the point where we get to practical completion to the point where we're a couple of years into the operating model, there will be choices to be made, and getting that governance model right from the outset will obviously set the tone in terms of some of the rather mundane but important things around VAT and stamp duty and, you know, things like that. So we will be taking some expert advice on that. In fact, we're already linked up with an Arts Council funded organisation who's interested in new models of delivery for arts centres. And I think it would be absolutely appropriate to share with members, perhaps through the member reference group, and then really for members to decide how else we do that, to make sure that we are getting kind of a plurality of views on that from councillors with the benefit of their experiences in the city, like we did previously at the consultation stage. So I think just to sort of summarise, some of the key headlines at the moment are there will be a collective endeavour at the point the building is opened. There is some clear, obvious advantages in an aspect of that being charitable, and understanding how that can all be brought together in a governance model that makes it financially sustainable is what we're working on at the moment.
Sean, thank you. Jessie.
Is the council considering any options for this venue to actually generate income for the council, not just to cover its costs, but also income that could be used to fund other arts projects?
Through you, Chair. I mean, obviously we will be ambitious, but we will present, as we've done for other investment decisions, best, worst case, medium scenarios. And we obviously need to be very mindful of the operating costs of a city centre building. And again, some of the mundane elements that go with that build up the cost base. But on the positive side, we need to be really ambitious around the fact that several of our partners in the Creative Consortium are themselves Arts Council funded organisations with national portfolios, national, very strong local reputations, and all of those organisations together agree that they are greater together than individually when it comes to use of a new venue. So through their own individual arts programming, we can definitely be ambitious and capitalise on the kind of appetite that there is in the city for festivals and outdoor activity and coming together to have an experience. And the research so far shows that for audiences, there is increasingly an appetite for those kind of experiential events, not necessarily a traditional come and sit and quietly watch something. So there's an element of that which does appear to be quite commercially viable, but we need, with any business plan, to be very realistic about what we present to you, about where we're going to be from years 0 to 3 versus where we may be in the future.
Many thanks. Any further? Marjorie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to see this paper and to see that we're making quite big steps, I think, here towards the realisation of this new arts centre. I had the pleasure with Lynn of meeting the Creative Consortium last week, and I was very impressed by their commitment to the project. I've just got a slight concern about the preferred operating model. It has to be in place by the period over the period to September 2024, which is when the construction works will be underway. Now, just wondering whether you had any kind of timetable, like, you know, when will there be a draft business plan, and would we get to see that? Do we need to see it even? But just the reassurance that there's a plan to sort of get there.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there'll be a published draft business plan June, July time, because that's our target for letting the construction contract. But there will be confidential working drafts well in advance of that for members of Member Reference Group to be involved in the scrutiny of that. And if members feel that another internal scrutiny mechanism involving members is beneficial as well, then we will do that. But obviously we recognise that that process will be embargoed until we, as far as externally is concerned, until we have a finished product, which would be circa June, July.
Any further questions or comments? Lynn.
Thank you. There are, yes, a number of different projects within this paper, and with using the government funding that we have. It was really interesting, you know, Marjorie and I as joint leaders met the Creative Consortium team, and also looking round the building again, you know, they are amazing buildings, and seeing them in the light of the planning application and what the Creative Consortium are proposing is really exciting. You know, it was a leap of faith that people would come forward and put their head above the parapet or their neck over the line to actually commit to delivering activities within the Scala. So that's hugely encouraging that a number of people are prepared to do that. There is an element of another leap of faith in terms of deliverability going forward. I think it's really important to remind people that the original funding, you know, that the money that came from government is only capital money for a building. So there never was money for how it would work inside the building, and this is where we're progressing with the project now. No, there are lots of people excited to see it progress. I think, you know, there is a whole different audience, you know, young people looking at completely different art opportunities that can be within the building. It is absolutely not going to compete with what is already in place. It's going to be a new offer, which is, and hopefully bring new investment into the city. I kind of cut the laying out the plan for the public realm. I think need to kind of express the concern or the disappointment to some extent, which, you know, I'm hearing from many other places. We're going to have beautiful pavements around the cross and these areas, and it's the nature of, you know, if money comes from on high, it comes with the strings or the parameters and what we bid for at the time. So we're going to be putting some more new pavements down in Angel Street, and meanwhile the High Street is literally falling apart and is becoming an increasing trip hazard. And, you know, and if the funding was given to us to do as we chose, then we would use it differently. So just kind of to express that frustration. And then with regard to Angel Place, to kind of say thank you to those that participated in it, and I think, you know, the messages there are really useful in terms of a way forward. I think we do need to be mindful that actually daytime use and nighttime use are completely different, and with very different audiences. You know, there is an existing nightclub just across the way, and there are other businesses nearby who are very much part of the nighttime economy. So I think it's very easy for those of us that don't go out clubbing anymore not to be aware of those things, and you know, those are all residents within our city, and those other things are part of an important part of our economy and visitors, and, you know, and what the BID are doing, and the Safe Space van, you know, and being in Angel Place, I think is something absolutely for us to sort of clock in terms of how we move forward. So yeah, thank you, to everybody for the work that's gone into this. really positive progress from what had been a very dark place and a very difficult inheritance at the beginning of this civic year.
Stephen.
Yes, thank you. This document has obviously quite a lot of elements to it. I think the positive thing is obviously the public realm and how we're going to tidy up that particular area of the city. But I will say again, I am very disappointed with what's happening to the Scala Theatre. I don't think the building really fulfills the role that's going to attract people into the centre in the sort of big numbers and that. Yes, it will provide a number of venues within that, which you could argue are already in and around our city. And I think it's, you know, it is going to be a challenge to get these three elements to it, the three studios, well occupied. Hopefully they will do. On New Year's Day, I was up in Sunderland and seeing what they're doing with their high street money. They've converted the old the buy station to a fantastic performing arts venue there, which is next to a very fine Edwardian theatre called the Sunderland Empire, which had a pub opposite called Best of Tilly's. They're also building opposite there another public space building as well. And the whole thing looks really, really impressive. And that's because they decided much earlier in the process what they were actually going to do, and they're now actually, it's now actually being built. Whereas we've sort of spent the last, 3 years sort of like, just really dithering and delaying. So we're now having this. I'm afraid I can't support the proposal as it is, and on the record, I won't be voting for it tonight. But I do understand that the rest of this, the majority of this meeting, will vote for it. And I do hope it does actually work. But I'm afraid this is not what was envisaged when we talked about this project 3 years ago. And in fact, if we'd moved quicker, I'm sure we could have been in a much better state. And if we'd been prepared to secure extra funding as well, we could have actually done it as well, because I think, it is a danger. I mean, just up the road in West Bromwich, they built a building called The Public, and that was an absolute, economic disaster. So, this is really full of risks.
Okay. Any further questions or comment? Jessie.
I'm in a bit of a challenging position because I'm here representing Mel, and we happen to disagree on this particular item, which she's given me permission to share. So I understand very much that the need to meet the requirements, that the deadline is looming, which we've now, seems we have an extension anyway. I think it feels like a missed opportunity to generate income for the city. I will be abstaining because of the split decision between what Mel would have wanted to do. So we've agreed on that compromise. I really hope that it works. For me, the priority has never been to have a cinema or a particular venue in there, but something that sustains itself financially, something that would generate income for the city. I look forward to the plans. I've seen some of the ideas. It's promising, the ideas of a dance studio or dance-related performance. That might work, but for me, the importance is something that generates income and is not become a burden and will eventually close.
Seemingly not many optimistic voices at the top end of the table. Any further comment? Eleanor, were you indicating yes?
Yeah, I disagree with what's being said. You know, we have to understand how we have arrived at this position with regards to the costs, completely out of the control of officers and the council at the end of the day. And the easy option would be to go, okay, let's send the money back. Let's send it back to the government. But we know we've taken a leap of faith in our arts community in the city. It shows that we have vision and shows that we have commitment. If you go around the Scala Theatre, I'm absolutely amazed when I went around there. The potential is unbelievable, and we should embrace that. I was also really keen to hear from the officer who showed us round of his vision and views that we could look to the future, that there may be an opportunity to get more grant funding later on, to do further expansion with the building. The possibilities are endless. What do? Send the money back and just let a building rot? We're already committed. We're doing a really good job to make the best of what we've got, and I'm really thankful for officers who have worked so hard to make sure that this scheme can continue, and I'm really grateful. So thank you very much. I will be supporting the recommendations.
Thanks. Any further comment? Okay, let's at that point go to the recommendations. I'm just going to go through them one by one because I think it's probably best that we get some clarity in terms of what people are thinking. So 1.1 approves the commission of technical design works REBA stage 4 for the new arts centre. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? 1.2 approves the council signing a pre-construction service agreement with the preferred contractor up to a maximum budget of £100,000 for enabling works to be undertaken in advance of any decision to award the full construction contract for the Scala and Corn Exchange. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Carried again.
So that's carried, Chair.
Yep. 1.3 notes ongoing discussions to develop a preferred operating model for the Arts Centre and approves an extension of the Memorandum of Understanding with the consortium partners to 31st August 2024 and agreed to transfer £80,000 from the Master Plan Reserve to form an enabling budget for this work. Pause there. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Again passed.
That's carried, Chair.
And 1.4 notes the outcome of the marketing exercise with the disposal of 8 Angel Street and agrees to accept the preferred offer identified in the confidential appendix to this report. Those in favour? Against? Abstentions? Again passed. Okay, many thanks. To agenda item 13, savings plan, St Martin's Gate multi-storey car park, LED lighting retrofit. Oh, I beg your pardon, yes, there are people outside the room. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, this is a proposal to invest in the replacement of lighting at St Martin's Gate multi-storey car park with new LED lighting with motion sensors. That's replacing the lighting on the upper floors. It's an energy-saving proposal, cost-saving proposal, in that unless activated, the lighting would be at 10% of full illumination. And obviously, if anyone comes in range, then the lights are turned on at full illumination. So only the lighting on the upper floors would be treated in this way. The lighting would remain at full illumination on the ground floor and obviously on the ramps to the upper floors and in the staircases and the entrance to the car park. It's estimated that for a cost of around £50,000, including contingencies, and that's based on quotations we've received, that the proposal would pay back in under 5 years. So that's a recommendation to accept the business case and to recommend to council to make an adjustment in the capital programme to be able to afford this.
Thank you, Kevin. Questions? Adrian.
Is there any chance of persuading the NCP car park to do the same?
We can have a go, yeah.
Any more questions or comment? Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say, you know, as Chair of the Environment Committee, you know, saving energy like this is really important. But I'm really pleased to see that the illumination on the ground floor and the routes for safety have been considered, because obviously safety is really important, but also that you've consulted with the British Parking Association so that we retain our accreditation. That's also extremely important. So thank you very much.
Any further? Pat Agar.
Thanks. Do I take it that the upper levels of the car park are not used at all, or almost not used after a certain time of day?
Well, the upper floors are shut off at can't recall the exact time in the evening, but they are sort of closed later in the evening and opened up in the morning. But due to the nature of a car park, the upper floors tend to be less used than the ground and first floors.
I think the reason I asked is because I know a lot of women who won't use the car park at all because they have safety fears, personal safety fears.
Yeah, and we've been careful to consider those, and obviously there will still be illumination, and we have the ability to adjust that illumination. So I think this is very much, we'll see where we are with 10% illumination, and bear in mind, you know, in a dark situation, 10% illumination is still pretty good illumination, but we have the ability to adjust the illumination to, if we need to allay any safety fears, then obviously we will do that. But as Councillor Lewing has mentioned, we've been careful to consult with the British Parking Association, and this is something that has been introduced in many other car parks up and down the country without those concerns.
Many thanks. Any further questions or comment? Not seeing anyone. So we can go to the recommendations. Simply, hopefully this one gets complete unanimity around the table. Approve the business case for replacement LED lightings with motion sensors for St Martin's Gate, and recommend to council that the capital programme is adjusted to include 55k funding for this project. Those in favour, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Kevin. So, to item 14, Town Investment Plan, and Shane.
Thank you, Chair. The government learned from the Future High Streets Fund, and with the Town Investment Plan, produced a funding mechanism which involved both capital and revenue. So this report covers revenue elements as well as capital elements. Its primary purpose, though, is to seek agreement to proceed with the revised scope of capital works. So this is around 2.6 million investment in our community centres, which is designed to enable increased amounts of training and support for local people to get involved with. I can't go into all the details of what's planned at each site. This has been through to the Towns Board, and there have been quite a lot of discussions with ward members around what's going to be delivered at each particular location. But at paragraph 3.5, there's a summary there of the capital side of the proposals. And as you can see, there's a wide-ranging engagement with quite a few of our community centres. And while what is proposed here and why it's here at the committee is the previous allocations which were agreed have had to be revised in the light of increasing costs, and some of those are set out at paragraph 3.6. So what we've done is through a process of redesign, created a capital programme here which will enable us to do all the things that we were going to do, enhance those facilities and still deliver the training which is required. So it's proposed that we go forward with that set of capital proposals at this stage. And then as far as the revenue element is concerned, in the training programme delivery, Worcester Community Trust, as part of its work that it's doing, particularly through the 2 building blocks, which are designed to provide construction skills training centres, to work with the partners to deliver training through those centres. Now that's a new proposal from their point of view. And because the council is responsible for the assets and is responsible for the funding, we need to ensure that what is delivered by that partner organisation is secured. So the process for doing that is to allow a sublease of those building blocks with Worcester Community Trust, which will enable them to work with their partners to provide that training. And at paragraph 4.6, we've set out things which we consider to be essential in terms of the heads of terms to make sure that the council's objectives are met through this process and that the town's fund requirements will still be met through that process. So it's really just about creating a document which can safeguard the council's interests, allows Worcester Community Trust to engage with their partners and enables the partners to deliver what they want to deliver through the building blocks. So those are the 2 components of what the report is for. The recommendations asked for agreement to proceed with the capital programme, of existing delegated powers to take that forward in terms of letting contracts. But the second is just to make sure that everyone's comfortable with what's happening in terms of the sublease and the skills training programme which is going to be delivered. We're asking for delegation to that to officers in consultation with the chair and vice chairs of this committee so we can make sure that everybody's happy with what's going forward in terms of the agreement. I hope that's clear enough. I realise it's quite a complex report because it combines these 2 elements, but essentially what we're looking for now is just to move forward in terms of the capital funding and the town investment plan and enable WCT to get together with their partners to deliver the skills programme through the centres which they construct. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Questions or comments? Robin.
Thank you, Chair. So when it comes to delivery of the training, then who will we be contracting with? Will it be WCT or will it be the lessor of the building block? In other words, whose neck do we get to wring if they fail to meet our outputs?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we are in the process of renewing our overarching funding agreement with WCT to take account of these additional expectations. So the primary relationship will be between the council and WCT, who then have to ensure that those obligations are passed on to their selected providers, with default mechanisms for the council if those expectations and contractual obligations aren't met. So it's a sort of chain of contractual relationships. There'll be a funding agreement, but in terms of the construction phase, there'll also be an agreement for lease. And at the end of the day, the lease to the chosen provider will itself contain quite a detailed permitted use clause around, which will link back to the grant funding agreement about the outputs that are required. So in other words, it would become a breach of the lease if those outputs weren't met under the grant.
Thank you.
Any further question? Adrian, and then Steve.
I was interested to hear what Shane had to say about through the report. I have not been consulted about any of the capital works to the 2 community centres in my ward, and I don't know if the councillors have been in relation to their community centres. And it is clear that it is very much the case that this is not just about the 2 building block sites, it's about training and skills which is put on in all the community centres, and nor have I been consulted about what those training skills and activities are, or how they're being funded, how they're proposed to be funded with any new training providers. And I would be interested to know when that consultation is going to take place.
If I may, through you, Chair, with regard to the specific activities, and I think this also goes some way to answering Councillor Norfolk's question around whose name's in the frame, so to speak. I'll refer back to the last PED committee, where agreement from members was given to proceed with the UK SPF allocation, and that funding for the skills element, you'll remember that those members that were party to that previous discussion, a separate 100,000 was allocated to Communities Fund, but the balance of the funding was for skills, and that was distributed through a number of contractors, for want of a better word, including both the County Council through the Hive for training for young people, and also through Worcester Community Trust for activities that take place across the community centres. Now, some of that money, some of that UK SPF money, as rightly has been identified, will go towards activities within the building block activities, and some of that money, as Councillor Gregson has alluded, will go to activities across the network of community centres outside of the building block, and those proposals were agreed at PED. At the last PED meeting. So that's where the process sat in terms of agreeing the revenue funding for those activities. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Pat Agar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking here at 2.7, 2.8 at outputs and outcomes, which are part of the business case, which I presume was commissioned by the city. At least that's what it looks like. How are those going to be reported to us? Because we're actually responsible, we're accountable for those.
If I may, through you, Chair, through the contractual arrangements to which I've alluded to that were agreed at PED, where we will have legal agreements in place with a number of providers to deliver the training courses set out in that report.
Yeah, are we contracting them, or is the community trust contracting them? Who are we?
So we will be contracting with WCT, and WCT will deliver the training provision directly through the community centres that we have a property lease with, and also some of the training that will be delivered in the building blocks will then be subcontracted to the organisation, the training organisation that WCT are going to sublet those facilities to. So it will be a blend of WCT training plus training by a subcontractor who will have a lease on the property.
Okay, so what that probably means is that the higher level qualifications will be delivered by the subcontractor, and that WCT will probably deliver the basic skills and stuff like that. What concerns me, I think, is the sustainability of the model.
Through you, Chair, I think one of the key elements that improves the sustainability from where we have been in the past is that up until now there has only been a certain level of property utilisation, if I can put it that way. The building block 1 and potentially 2 are not facilities that have been used every hour of every day. So income has been rather limited. The advantage of the sublease is that the training provider, who is an accredited training organisation, will be able to use those premises for a much greater percentage of the day and pay WCT a commercial lease fee for that use. So I think what this gives us is a much stronger financial viability than we would have had if all of the training was limited to what WCT could provide. WCT is not an accredited provider, and so of course it would be limited to the types of training that it could deliver for the community. I think just to add one final point, we have been really clear to ensure that the let's call it higher level training that the provider can provide as accredited training does not displace the training that is so important to the community. Because I remember many years ago with Building Block 1 at its inception, a lot of the training was aimed at really helping people get back into the training habit, get out during the day. It wasn't high-level accredited training, and we've worked really hard to make sure that in any subcontracting agreement, that type of training is not going to be displaced because it still remains very important for the community. Thank you.
Okay, Pat, thank you. Lynn.
Thank you. With respect to the late out, I wonder whether it does sound a very complicated arrangement that we're looking at and looking to sign off. And I wonder if it would be, my question is actually around paragraph 4.2. Since the original business case was approved, there have been changes in the national funding and training delivery environment. And I suspect very few of us, if any, actually understand what that. So what have those changes been, and how is it impacting on what we or the community trust are able to do going forwards?
To you, Chair. I think at face value, what this paragraph is saying is that the access to funding that WCT had years ago at the outset of this project has, for a number of reasons, become unavailable. And therefore, coming back to the point I made in response to Councillor Agar's comments, without a commercial sublet, WCT would be in a very difficult position. This hopefully gives, I'm trying not to say the best of both worlds, but hopefully gives a situation where the financial viability of WCT can be assured in order to carry on delivering the training that is so much required for the community, whilst at the same time entering into a commercial arrangement that will give it an income stream and the ability to provide the higher level training. But it is, going back to your particular question, Councillor Denham, there is clearly a change in the environment that makes it much more difficult for organisations like WCT, who is, as I say, not an accredited training organisation, to access mainstream training funding.
Okay, thank you. Steve Cochrane.
Thank you, Chair. I've essentially similar questions, but the focus for them is not WCT, but St Peter's, because it's a completely different sort of entity to WCT. Firstly, on the capital side of things, the grant of £140,000 to support the building of the village hall is to the St Peter's Village Hall Association. Is there included in that grant agreement that the village hall will be then handed over to the parish council, or will it be retained as property owned by the St Peter's Village Hall Association Limited? And then the second question is about the training, because it's lumped together, WCT and St Peter's, this number of trainings per year. Is there a specific allocation for St Peter's? What is the implementing body? Will that also be a subcontracted out to a different provider to provide the training? And for how many years will this number of learners be required to fulfil the requirements of the town investment funding?
If I may, I don't know if my colleagues can offer any view. I think we would have to provide a written response to that. As you would no doubt have worked out, my engagement personally on this has been through the WCT arrangements. I'm not aware of any transfer of the asset away from the Village Hall Association, but without making any assumptions, we will provide a written response to those questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Absolutely fine.
I was just checking on if the response about consultation on the detail of the capital works that I asked about.
On what, sorry?
Shane said that there'd been local member consultation on capital works in the community centres, and I don't believe there has been.
Through you, Chair, I'll clarify my comment in that I'm aware of consultation that's taken place with individual members at ward level as to what's happening in respect of their particular community centres, but I can't say that that's happened across the board. So I'd need to go back and find out an answer to that and to understand what further consultations would take place.
Okay. Eleanor's contribution, and then we'll go to the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to St Peter's. Obviously, we're not party to the Village Hall Association as ward councillors. We're not aware of what is quite going on. So I think probably we need to have written answers, because does that mean that there's going to be a lease taken over the Village Hall in St Peter's if and when it gets built? And also what happens if the Village Hall doesn't get built? Because I think there's significant funding concerns and there's quite a shortfall. So I think there's quite a bit that's relevant to St Peter's that we need, as ward councillors, we need to know a bit more really what's going on, because to date we haven't been informed of anything. We have no idea what's going on.
I think I mean, written responses, I suspect, would be appropriate in those instances, yes. Okay, sorry, Sean.
Can I just offer, Chair, that I think as a leadership team we are conscious of the significance of this project and the interest in it, and if it's helpful for a further progress report to come back on the project at the next PNR, then very happy to do that. And in the meantime, we will provide substantive answers, because these are all very good points. So the focus of this report is on the commissioning of the capital works, but understanding that this is a cross-city project, if it's beneficial to make sure that all the answers are in a report back in the public domain at the next committee, then very happy to do that.
Through you, Chair, if I might just add, I think as a matter of general due diligence, we wouldn't make a grant award to part fund a capital project if at that point the rest of the grant funding had not been identified. Obviously, we would not be, operating it or entering into that sort of agreement. We would need to be assured that the rest of the funding was available at some point to make sure that our contribution would result in a finished building rather than, sitting in somebody else's account, so to speak, without a building going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we move to the recommendations. 1.1 approves the revised scope of works as detailed within this report. 1.2 delegates authority to enter into any necessary leases and agreements to the corporate director, finance and operations, homes and communities, in consultation with the chair and vice chairs of this committee. Those in favour, please show. I think we have unanimity there. Yeah. Oh no, beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah.
Any abstentions?
Abstentions? Sorry. Beg your pardon, Jesse. Right. So we move to agenda item 15. Do stay with me, folks. So, council tax, second homes premium, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, the councils are being given powers, if they choose to pursue them, to apply a council tax premium to partially empty properties, which are commonly known as second homes. This is something, for example, that already exists in Wales, where if people have more than one property, then they are charged a premium on the second and third properties and so on. They are permissive powers, so we don't have to take them up. If we do, then we need to do that at least 1 year in advance, so we wouldn't be able to introduce this until April 2025 if we decide to go forward with it now. Other councils across the county have adopted this approach, and will therefore be consistent with what's going on throughout the rest of the county. The purpose behind it is to ensure that we can bring as many properties into the market as possible. A few years ago, the council agreed to apply premiums for long-term empty homes, which a policy which we've been following, so it's consistent with that approach. And so I would recommend that we take up this opportunity. As with the previous legislation, we have reserved the right to apply discretion. So if someone's in a particular situation, for instance, where they're waiting for probate or they're trying to sell a property but aren't able to, then under delegated powers, I've taken the opportunity to waive this, the imposition of the premium for a period while they get that sorted out. So there's a formal agreement to do that. So I'm proposing that we have those same arrangements in place. So where there are exceptional circumstances, we can make exceptions to that.
Thank you. Thoughts, comments? Marjorie?
Thank you, Chair. Just as I wholeheartedly agree with this proposal. There's such a shortage of houses to buy or rent. This just makes perfect sense to me.
Any other contributions? Jessie?
Do we have any data into how many houses roughly fall under this, would fit this criteria, and any idea why these houses are empty? Are they being let for holiday letting, or do we have any information about that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, the data's in 3.3. We've identified 293 second homes at the moment, and they are a mix of things. Yes, holiday lets and properties which are held, for a variety of reasons. We don't really have any data as to why they're partially empty, but we can identify them because it's a requirement for people when they apply for council tax to notify us if it's a second property.
Any further questions or comment? Marjorie again, sorry.
Sorry to prolong things. I was just wondering about a house that's used as an Airbnb. Would that be a second home as well?
Through you, Chair. Well, that would depend on whether it's their person's own home and they're simply letting a part of that as an Airbnb. And the second question is if it's still retained for council tax purposes. So if it's used, if it's let after a certain period or for a certain amount of time, then it might be classed as a business exercise, in which case it would qualify for business rates. But if it's retained as a council tax, then yes, that would qualify as a second home.
Many thanks. So, move to the recommendation. The committee recommends to full council from April 1st, 2025, properties classed as second homes be charged a council tax premium equivalent to 100% of the council tax, and the Corporate Director of Finance be authorised to agree individual exemptions based on government guidance. Those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Move to agenda item 16, which is the appointment of Worcestershire Internal Audit Shared Service. Shane?
Thank you, Chair. As members will be aware, appointments of heads of service require member approval. Through the recruitment process, Councillor Stanley supported that, and we, as you'll see from the CV, which was attached on the pink papers, we were wholeheartedly in support of Chris Green as the preferred candidate. Normally, this report would go through to P&GP committee, but as the last one was cancelled and the next one's not until the 28th of February, I brought it here in the hope that members will approve the appointment and we can go ahead and bring Chris on board. I'm looking forward to having a head of internal audit again. That would be very nice. Thank you, Chair.
Having been part of that process, I can wholeheartedly echo Shane's comments. Any thoughts from around the table to the recommendation? Those in favour, please show. Wholehearted. Thank you.
Chair, as he's starting on Monday, that's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a dread when I come to agenda item 17, appointments to outside bodies, but there we are. We'll move swiftly through it, I hope. Sian.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you're not scarred by previous experiences. So we have some nominations here, obviously recognising the fact that nominations to outside bodies can survive, obviously, changes of then political appointments in the council. They are appointments made by the council as a whole to outside bodies, as opposed to necessarily being linked to a term of office as a councillor of the City Council. So in terms of the vacancies, the proposal is to appoint to Hallow United Charities and the Hot Market Charity. The Green Group have proposed some nominations. No other nominations have been received at the time that the report went to print. I'll just confirm that any subsequent, no subsequent nominations have been received. So the proposal is to appoint Councillor Tor Pingree to Hallow United Charities for a term of office which will end on 30th June 2025. And the proposal is to appoint Councillor Katie Collier to the Hot Market Charity to fill one of the two current City Councillor vacancies. The term is until May 2024. And then everyone is up for renewal. So there we are. There will be a Hot Market meeting in March, so there is business to be conducted. That's all, Chair. Those can go to the vote unless any other names are put forward now.
Any suggestion of anyone else? I'm not seeing anything. So can we just put that to the vote? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. And I think that's unanimous. Excellent. I'm not aware of any other business. On that note, does anyone particularly want to discuss anything off video, so to speak? No. So in that case, good night and thanks for your time. Thank you.